Oh my gosh, we're both laughing because there is a picture of Kris looking like he's 12 years old. And if you are watching this now, he has the most amazing beard. And so I'm glad you've aged a little bit and you've got some wisdom to bring to the show. That's amazing. Now I see why you carry it well. But we are so excited to have you on the show today and truly to share your wisdom, because the first time we met, I was just blown away by your story and your passion for what it is that you do. And I have such a heart for Mexico and for other countries in general, but the way that you have poured your life into something that most people aren't capable of doing. And I think honestly, it's just because they have no exposure to it. And you've been doing this for so long through the Urban Passion and the UrbanPromise project, but I want to know where all of it started. And so we're going to take it back, Kris, to the young Kris that we saw pictured, and tell us a bit about your story and how you came to know Christ and what being a messenger means to you in the process.
Thanks, Tamara. Yeah, I shared the link with my wife before coming over, and we both just burst out laughing when we saw the picture. I think that was my first year with UrbanPromise, which was over 10 years ago. So, so yeah, that was a great picture.
It's okay. It's good. This is how you turn it into a movement, right? Like you just have to start somewhere.
Absolutely. Yeah, so that was back over 10 plus years ago. I had just started with UrbanPromise. I was living in Honduras at the time, but actually my connection to Honduras went back even further. When I was in high school, the start of high school was when I started following Jesus. Had a really awesome youth group and youth leaders who organized annual mission trips down to Honduras. And so I went a couple times with my family and with leaders from our church. And something stuck in me and just always had a desire to go back. I ended up spending a summer in Honduras at the end of college for a couple months, working with another younger missionary couple doing a combination of youth ministry and health education in rural Honduras. And then I ended up, I studied teaching, taught for a couple years, ended up teaching at a bilingual school in Honduras. And that's when I got connected to UrbanPromise. And I found a community of people who really lived out, I think, all the reasons I went into teaching in the first place. And that was part of the mission of the organization, was to really invest in young people in a holistic way and come around them, help them grow into finding their identity in Christ and become servant leaders and impact the world around them. And so I fell in love with the organization back then, and I still love it. It's been a beautiful journey along the way.
So good. I love the portion of knowing that like your family's seeds are a part of that. I'm a mom myself, and I've got a 9 and 11-year-old, and I always think about like, what are my kids going to do with the investment that we're bringing them into and the life that we let them see that is unlike our culture. And I think a lot of people miss that, mainly because they don't travel. And I'm like, if you can invest in education for your kids, invest in travel so that they can be educated on what the world is actually like, rather than in the bubble that we remain in so often. So tell me about like that first experience where you kind of rocked. Like, was your value system shifted? Like, what did that look like?
Yeah, I grew up in a middle-class family. Both my parents were in the military, and we moved around a lot. Always lived in nice places, and going to Honduras was probably the first time I saw a lot of physical needs presented in front of me, but also amidst kind of a material poverty, I also saw a relational wealth too, that really drew me in. I saw people who lived a good quality of life despite not having access to a lot of the things we do, a lot of things I grew up having access to. I don't know that I necessarily connected all those dots in those first couple trips as a high school student, but there were definitely seeds that were planted, and they were things that kind of planted a desire in me to go back and spend more time there. And I saw education kind of as a way to go back and serve practically in that atmosphere. But really, a lot of a lot of the people who I grew to know in Honduras ended up kind of transforming me along the way too.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that that's such a beautiful like dichotomy of humility, right? Because we can go into a place and expect that we're going to be the educators. And so often they actually are teaching us so much more because we're surrendered to that process. And only God can allow that to happen, because otherwise pride and ego kind of play the main hat in those roles. Talk to us about, because I think often like when we think about ethnicity and diversity, we're actually talking about it from another lens than you being like the singular white person in a space. What was that immersion like for you when you went to stay there for an entire summer? And how did you deal with like the variations in their culture?
Yeah, well, I minored in Spanish throughout college because
Okay.
of those early experiences in Honduras,
Yeah.
and was really excited to be able to go back for a longer amount of time and feel a little bit more equipped. And I showed up, and there no Spanish, like it did not work.
Oh
It was
no.
broken. And
Like, ¿dónde está el
man,
baño?
it was pretty rough. The people who I lived and worked with in community, they could attest to it. My Spanish was awful. Yeah, there was just a lot of like rocking my comfort zone. I constantly was kind of just didn't know what was going on around me. Would just go along with whatever car I was in, whatever group of people. But I had some amazing people around me. The church that I was partnering with, the young missionaries that I was working with, they really were so patient with me. There was, new foods to try. There was the language. There was just, I was working in the city of Tegucigalpa, as well as some rural areas. And so just moving around the city was like completely new. And so it was a lot of just taking it in, and a lot of just going with the flow, and a lot of just trusting the people that I was with, and trusting that God had a purpose, because I kind of felt a little useless when I first showed up.
That's great. You're like, I'm sent. Like, here I am, Lord, send me. And then you get there and you're like, why am I here? What am I doing? What am I even capable of doing?
Yes.
So that literally makes me think so much about the disciples, so many different elements of the Bible. Did that like come to life in a new way as you watched how like Jesus literally sent people out, or even after Jesus's death, what happened where people went and walked into these different territories, but were called into certain places? How did that did you do some wrestling in that? Was it help? Was it revelatory?
Yeah, I think, and thinking back to that summer, kind of the starting experience for me, there was a lot of growth, both in my Spanish and being able to learn the language.
Yeah.
But also, yeah, I think a lot of what Jesus talked about kind of coming to life for me. I mean, I stayed with families who would give up their main bedroom for me to sleep in, and they'd go and sleep on the couch. So this offer of hospitality that just went above and beyond. Or I'd go with a family, a small family in a rural area of Honduras that led a little Bible kids program. And afterwards, they'd prepare lunch for me and the missionary couple, and they killed their chicken to make chicken soup for us, which was a big deal because that chicken would normally be their provider of eggs and protein. But so again, like this great generous hospitality and generosity towards the stranger was just shown to me. And I think that was part of the rocking of my world, as well as kind of, again, seeing the richness of relationship as I went. I think people were just so much more about the time and the relationship spent with you than they were concerned about a schedule or where to be next. And that really, that challenged me to think about how Jesus spent time with people. I think, especially looking back now, can really just see a lot of what Jesus modeled in those little bits and pieces of people, that community that I met.
I had never thought about the element of being a messenger, and we haven't really talked a lot about language and like the variations of language in like wanting to be sent. I mean, I literally have this massive map on my wall downstairs, and it's like has undulation and different coloration, and we've got the pins to all the places we've been. And I often circle the places of my heart that I just know that the Lord has illuminated for me, and I haven't taken the next step of saying, I should probably learn the language fluently or at least more. But I also believe that that idea of immersion and just getting there and just like being obedient in that, you're going to adopt, because there's different dialects, there's different slangs. You're going to learn something and you're going to go there and like, no one talks like that. I sound ridiculous. And so it's like adaptation in its finest, to just be able to say in obedience, I'm going to go, even if I look goofy, even if I sound goofy. But I do think that there's a vital element of language for those who are listening, if you have that calling, because that's like, I always come to a call every time, Kris, with like a desire for, how's the Lord going to convict me? How can he mature me? And I really feel like that sense of like, you want to go somewhere. And I have like this much el poco. I don't even know. I got a little bit, y'all. I got a little bit. And so it's encouraging me to be like, okay, I need to get my Duolingo practice back on. And honestly, at the end of the day, it's just being there with the people. So speaking to something a little bit different and pivoting and 10 years, okay, 10 years with any organization is a long time. And a lot of people who come on the show are entrepreneurs. And I think that when I spoke to you, that was like, I hear that, like, I see that entrepreneurial like fire inside of you, that you've been able to really do a lot with the organization from an ideation and an implementation perspective. So it's really called entrepreneurship, right? It's like being inside of an organization that's been established and then being able to like go and grow that. Talk to us about what that process has been like and being able to expand UrbanPromise.
Yeah. So kind of as I started with UrbanPromise, one of the kind of my first big role in that, or in the organization, was starting up a new program we called Urban Trekkers within the organization, which really kind of took a lot of our youth development to the next level. There's already a ministry established. There's already a lot of programs. We have after school camps that run kind of throughout the year, where kids come and they have a safe place to get extra homework help, tutoring, but also they're getting extra classes. They're learning everything from reading and writing to going deeper with Bible classes. And then it's all led by high school students, local high school students from that community. And so these high schoolers are really the leaders for these kids, and there's a lot of pouring into them. And so we always look for ways to help those high school students continue to grow and learn and be the leaders we wanted them to be for those kids. And so Urban Trekkers was kind of a really cool way to help extend that leadership training and helping our students grow outside their comfort zones by bringing them kind of outdoors, doing experiential learning. So everything from hiking and camping trips, backpacking, but also gardening, local, like learning from local historical sites. So it was taking learning kind of that they're getting in the classroom, learning that they're teaching kids, but giving them an opportunity to experience it and continue to grow. And so for me, it was the first time starting a new program like that. Had to do a lot of fundraising through like my contacts and churches and people back home that I knew. And it was a lot of kind of learning some of the skills of just how do you communicate that back to people, like the impact back to people back home who are getting towards this. How do we think of ways to make this sustainable? And so I had I got to be in that role for about 3 years, leading students in these expeditions. We did everything from hiking, backpacking up the tallest mountain in Honduras, to literally biking from coast to coast over the course of a week. We would do service learning trips to the city where our students from Honduras are serving other parts of Honduras. So it just the amazing experiences. I have a plethora of stories that just show kind of the impact, I think, of those experiences for those kids. But so going back to kind of the entrepreneurial side, I think that sparked in me a lot of, how do you start something and sustain it? My role kind of shifted today. I do a little bit more of helping support some of our leaders who have a similar vision as Urban Promise, for making an impact in their communities. And so we started a few years ago, we started a program called the UrbanPromise Center for Entrepreneurial Leadership, where we invite leaders from across Latin America to come spend a year with us in Honduras. They get plugged into our programs, so they're kind of volunteering in the after-school program with the kids, with the youth, urban trekkers. My favorite, a little bit biased, but they're also gaining a lot of executive level leadership skills, and so they're learning what it takes to form a board together, how to fundraise, how to create a strategic plan, how to create and maintain a group of volunteers or staff. And so they're learning both the programmatic side of how to invest in their communities, but they're also kind of learning that leadership side, how to think sustainably and for the long term. And our hope is really that as these leaders graduate from our programs, and they've gone on to launch ministries now in other parts of Honduras, Colombia, and southern Mexico, our hope is that that impact will last. We know that they're doing amazing work already with the kids and youth in their communities. They've taken their vision and they've already brought it to life. It's amazing to see. And we're also challenging them to think as an entrepreneur, to think, how can I create sustainability, creating partnerships with churches, businesses, other organizations. Some are creating like little clothing stores, selling clothing secondhand to generate income, selling some of the local crafts and artistry in their communities, and looking for ways to kind of raise money through sales back in the States. So we're trying to help them think in those ways as well. And it's something that's always a work in progress. And our hope is, to really see vibrant communities across Latin America where young people thrive by investing in those entrepreneurial leaders who have a Christ-like heart.
That is awesome. I feel like obviously we prayed, but people don't know that. I say obviously, we always pray before we get on, but the multiplication process of that, like there's just so much good seed that's being planted and then given out to those other communities. It's really amazing and biblical, which is why I think discipleship, it's ultimately what it is. It's a discipleship program for entrepreneurs to be able to do what you've done, but also do what God has put inside of their heart. So to be able to kind of tweak that to their own vision. I'm curious, as you are working with them as well as with the students and all of that, I think what intrigues a lot of people about going to other countries and investing in other communities is there seems to be, in my opinion, just a move of God. Like God moves in such a different way, and he's not moving differently. He moves the exact same way here. We just don't have the eyes to see or the ears to hear. We're also very comfortable here. So our like yearning for God comes in really only selfish desperation rather than circumstantial desperation. And so can you tell us either a story or like process through what have you seen that is variable to when you come home to versus when you're there?
Yeah, that's a great question. So now I live in the States, and I travel back and forth to visit our site, mostly in Honduras, but also some of our other affiliates. And I mean, those trips are just reminders of what I got to see in the time that I lived in Honduras. There are some amazing leaders that I get the privilege to work with who truly seek the Lord in all that they do, who live out following Jesus in their own personal, quiet, private life, but also in their life with the kids, their life in community. I think of one of our leaders her name is Carmen. Carmen has been on staff in Honduras for, I want to say, 5 or 6 years now. She started as like a vacation camp director during vacation time, and then came on board as a full-time staff member as an assistant director to our youth program. She eventually took over as the youth director, but then, so her husband is from the city of San Pedro Sula. And for those who don't know, San Pedro Sula is probably the city that you may hear about the most when you hear about Honduras, when it's referring to a lot of the violent crime rate, is centered around the bigger cities. And San Pedro used to hold the title of the most violent city in the world.
Wow.
And so it's since violence has gone down, but still remains high gang activity, a lot of drug trafficking happening in that area. And Carmen's husband is from San Pedro, and they a couple years ago had kind of felt like God was leading them to move back to San Pedro. And Carmen kept talking to her husband. She's like, you need to apply for this fellowship program. Like, I really think you need to start something in San Pedro. We're going back. Like, UrbanPromise, wow. You love it. And so she kept kind of pressing her husband. And then she was praying one day, and all of a sudden she said, I heard God's voice say, Carmen, I want you to start something in San Pedro Sula. And she, she is somebody who I have a lot of respect for, just in her humility, but also her boldness in the way she leads our youth, but also just the way she talks about the Lord with other people. She has a heart for this city that was just her husband's, and now is her and her husband. Carmen went through our fellowship program. She really sacrificed a lot. She stepped down from her role as youth director. Her husband had to move back to San Pedro early for job, for income. They have 2 young girls. And so there was a lot of back and forth between the 2 cities. It's about a 5-hour drive because they're repairing the highway. Just not a convenient situation for them. But she decided, I'm going to invest in this. I'm going to prepare myself. And when you hear Carmen's heart for the kids that she's now working with in San Pedro, because she started in January of this year, her own program called Resilientes, or the Resilient. Her heart beats for seeing resilience built in the life of kids who live on kind of the border of the city. They're called the bordes communities, where a lot of the houses are kind of just made out of scrap metal, scrap wood. They're by the river. There's usually a lot of flooding. A lot of those kids don't go to school. She has invested this whole past year and wants to invest her life in serving these kids. She has partnered with her church in San Pedro to serve them every day and invite a place for them to come and have a safe place to grow, to know the Lord, to grow in resilience despite their circumstances. And she just continues to live it out, despite the hardships of being apart from her husband for a year, of having to step down from a job, of taking a risk to start something new, be an entrepreneur. I'm privileged to get to work alongside.
It's so beautiful. And there's going to be so many more like Carmen. Yeah. Right. And that's what's so beautiful is like she's paving the way. She gets to be an amazing testimonial for UrbanPromise, and also like that hope that's continually instilled in you as a leader to be able to say, okay, it worked here. Let's keep the fire going.
Yeah.
I think that is something that as a messenger, as somebody who's always like on the move for my movement, I'm like, okay, I just need that little bit of twinkle. Like it doesn't have to be dynamic, and Carmen is surely dynamic, but it's like those little bits of along the way that help you to just stay in, to have our own sense of resilience and grit, to say, God, I know what you said is bigger than what I'm currently living. And so call me deeper and call me greater into the promise. Yes. I know now, because you're not in Honduras, as you mentioned, you're back here in the States full time. You're in Nashville. Can you talk to us about how you're doing that even in the States? Because I think some people listening, as much as I want you to have a global mindset, I still think we're really like nationally focused or locally community oriented. And I think that that's beautiful. We need it clearly based on the state of America. And there really are some places like you're mentioning with like the style in which people are living is actually happening here in America. So talk to us about UrbanPromise Nashville and how we as a community can get behind that, adopt some of the principles that you guys have in our own missions, but also be able to support what you guys are doing.
Yeah, so Urban Promise started about 35 years ago in Camden, New Jersey, actually. And the model has spread throughout the US and then internationally as well. I think I've lost count now, but I think like over 30 affiliates internationally, many of them here in the States. One of them is UrbanPromise Nashville. My wife and I, we continue to do the Urban Trekkers piece with them, which I love. So we take our students, we do like a quarterly trip, camping, hiking. We've gone out to the Smoky Mountains, went out to Colorado a couple of years ago, but we also do local treks with our students. Even just a day hike here and there is a chance to build community, to build our relationships, build that leadership out. And it's the same model. Those students, those high school students are serving the kids here in their community in Nashville. Awesome. Nashville's Urban Promise is a little bit unique because here we serve the refugee and immigrant communities. And so all of our students come from different nationalities. And for me, it's really kind of interesting getting to have a foot in both worlds because, you know, I have students that are from Honduras or from Venezuela, El Salvador, and I get to know the stories of a lot of our kids in Latin America, and now some who are here and their roots are in Latin America. And for me, it's one continuous story. It's one continuous way of serving our community. And it's beautiful to see the kids here serving other kids from other nations, all in our city.
That's cool. That's cool. That honestly gives them the kind of same experience, like a full circle element of what you had from a high school lens with your family here. But even if their ability to boot on the ground isn't there, they get to see it. And I'm just prayerful of the growth of this because it sounds like it's already done a lot of traction. 35 years for any ministry is amazing. But when we met, you were still boots on the ground, making waves here in Virginia Beach. And so talk to us about like your connection desire. I mean, we have so many churches, so many ministries represented here. What is it that like really would help what it is that you're doing and get to the message, like really to create even more of a movement inside of our cities here in America or beyond?
Yeah. So when we met in Virginia Beach, my biggest connection was just personal. My parents and my sister live really close there. And it was really cool. We went for, there was a concert series and we had set up a promotional booth just to talk about our mission and our vision of what we do through Urban Promise. My parents and sister volunteered to run the booth with me, which was really special. But really, I think what we see is that, we have a big vision to see these communities throughout Latin America to thrive. And we believe that big vision requires a big movement of people to come behind it. People who believe in what we're doing, who believe in our work, who have a heart for that. And so we look for churches, individuals, businesses who believe in that same vision and want to see us be able to achieve it. And, a lot of that comes through financial backing, but more than that, I think a heart connection to just see and know the people that we work with. We have groups that come down and visit our ministry in Honduras. We have groups that come here to Nashville and see what we're doing. And I think it's when we have that heart connection that our heart starts to beat for something beyond us. And we want to see it continue to thrive no matter what. And so obviously, a big hurdle for any nonprofit is financial, is to be able to live things out. A lot of our work is just investing in leaders and growing them and developing them, helping them be able to live out their vision. And they need a way to survive economically as well. So being able to pay our staff. But also, there's been so many cool connections that have just come from others visiting our site and realizing that they have a passion to help develop a new program for sustaining, creating a small business plan with some of our staff to help them see, hey, I can create a little bit more sustainability and serve my community through this means. We had a group, a very simple example. We had a group that came down that loved golf and brought golf clubs to our campus in Honduras. And as simple of a thing as it was. We did a golf clinic day of teaching these kids at this one particular camp that was from a village outside of the main city called La Pintada. These kids are probably in the lowest economic class in that area. They're from Mayan Chorti descendants. And kids from La Pintada had never touched a golf club. And all our staff, after they saw them, hitting the golf club, just swinging throughout the day, these business leaders came in and taught them for the day and left the golf clubs behind. Our staff said, man, we have always seen golf as like this high class thing that only like the really rich might do this. I think there's one big golf course in Honduras, like along the coast. But imagine our kids from La Pintada getting to touch a golf ball and golf club and say that they know how to actually play golf now. So even just restoring some dignity in small ways like that, for me, are beautiful moments to lift up the kids and the youth that we work with. So
that's such a good story, such a visual. Yeah, that's so good. And I do think, as you were talking about, like just getting connected to the heart and understanding that. And you guys can go to their site. You guys obviously know, when you're listening, all the links are below to be able to do so. But to be able to go and just like witness and see some of the pictures and to put your heart in that space, there might be so many different facets of this conversation that Kris and I had that kind of pique your interest, whether it's the educational side, whether it's the entrepreneurial side, whether it's the development side, whether it's for the children, it's for the leaders, like, or the explanation of actually like expanding other people into different cities and territories. There's so much here. There's so much rich opportunity for people to get invested. And I don't often do like a request of investment or anything. I've never actually done that on my show, but really feel the call that if you guys feel led to give, like, this is a season of generosity that our communities are in need, and it's both here and it's abroad. And for us to be able to sow good seed into organizations like this that we can trust, we're willing to sow seed into getting these and our lattes or our clothes and the things that we actually don't even need at all. And so this is a need. This is a dire need. If you're thinking about a child living in a hut on the side of a stream that's going to get flooded, and like, every time that I get to go abroad and I get to do missions work anywhere, it blows my mind. And I can't wait to take my kids on their first expedition, their first trek in some capacity with Kris and your all's crew, hopefully in Honduras. And so it wouldn't be too far away from where we visit our family in Guadalajara. But this has been such an awesome conversation, and just really, I love the pace of it. And I hope that people are drawn into that. It's different. It's been different. The conversation has been different than a lot of the people that we interview. And I love that part. It was one of the reasons I wanted you to come on the show. I'm like, first off, you're phenomenal at quick fire questions. and then secondly, just the depth, like the heart of how you answer a question is so eloquent. And so I just appreciate the pace and the rhythm in which you respond. And I know that it comes from such a well of just sitting with people and wanting to honor the process, the organization, and the work that you get to do every single day. So we're grateful for you and your wife. I'm so grateful that you got to come on. Is there any like final things that you're like, I was really hoping I was going to talk about X, Y, and Z, but our conversation went this ABC?
Oh man, I didn't know what we were going to talk about, so I didn't have anything in mind. But I just want to say,
even better.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you, Tamara. It was really awesome. You asked great questions. I remember that in Virginia Beach, and so just thank you for giving us the opportunity to share a little bit about our vision and what we hope for. So I love what you're doing.
Absolutely. Yes, thank you so much. Well, you guys can get invested in the projects they have going on. Definitely check out UrbanPromiseHonduras.org. And I'm sure from there, Kris, can we go to all the other places and locations that it's offered? Okay, awesome. I love the main screen image. It just brings me such joy. I'm like, I want to be there. I want to be on a trek. I need to do that right now. I feel like I need to go get my toes outside and go grounding just to be able to be in that space and that rhythm and that cadence that you offer. But I am in Nashville way more often than I am in Honduras. So I'll have to come see you and see what you're doing.
Yes,
I also am a part of something called the Citywide Initiative. And the Citywide intention. And I'm on the relational flourishing board. So when you're mentioning just the relational capital that you saw in the people's intrinsic joy versus the extrinsic kind of consumerism element that we have often here. But our intention is to go into these big cities and breathe life into some of these different arenas. And so I really think that there's a connection point there for you to get invested, to see how do we develop opportunity, because it's very much business oriented, but the businesses have really beautiful, rich missions. And I think that this one would be an amazing one to have integrated. So I'll surely connect you there as well.
Thank you. Love that.
Yeah, sure thing. Well, be blessed, brother. Thank you for the work that you do. Keep going. And I'm excited to see if you'll have a beard in 10 years, if you're trying to like anti-age, grow, or what that's going to look like.
A little more gray or whiter. I don't know.
Maybe. All right. You and Kailee be blessed. We'll chat soon. Thanks for being here.
Bye.
Bye, y'all.